The room laughed with him. That's the part I still think about. Not what he said, but how easy it was for 140 people to laugh at it. I am Clara, 35-year-old. This is my true story. Please hit like and subscribe for new videos. I was standing in my dress blues at the head table, 9 years into the Army, a staff sergeant with a Bronze Star I'd never mentioned to half the guests in that room, and I smiled the way you smile when you're trained to hold formation under fire. My hand found the edge of my rank insignia and straightened it, a habit from basic that never left me. Behind Derek, near the back doors, a man in Army service uniform I didn't recognize had gone very still. He wasn't laughing. He was watching me, like he was waiting to see what I'd do next. My phone buzzed once in the small clutch in my lap, a text from a number I didn't know. "Ma'am, you need to see something before the honeymoon. Mr." I didn't know yet that 4 days later, a soldier I'd never met would walk up to my husband and ask him a single question that would end his marriage before it ever really started. But that part comes later. First, you should know how we got to that microphone at all. I met Derek Holt at a fundraiser 2 years earlier, the kind of event where officers' spouses network and civilians circle looking for clients. He was a wealth consultant, which I later learned was a nice way of saying he sold insurance products to young enlisted families who didn't know better. He was charming in the specific way that charming men are, attentive, well-dressed, always laughing a half second before you finished your joke. I was a staff sergeant in military intelligence at Fort Kessler, a logistics support base outside a town most people couldn't find on a map, and I'd been divorced from the Army's version of a social life for years. Long hours, one deployment behind me, another looming. Derek felt like color after a long stretch of gray. We married fast. 8 months, a courthouse-adjacent whirlwind that my mother called reckless and I called finally choosing myself. My best friend and battle buddy, Sergeant First Class Marcus Ruiz, was less generous about it. Ruiz was the kind of NCO who chewed cinnamon gum through every briefing and had a saying for everything. "Paperwork doesn't lie, Cal," he told me over coffee 2 weeks before the wedding. "People do. Read every form before you sign it." I laughed him off. I told him Derek wasn't like that. 2 nights before the wedding, I got a text from Derek about the seating chart. "Can we put my mom near the front? She wants a good view when I do the toast." I remember thinking it was sweet, that he cared about his speech landing. I didn't think about it again until I was standing at that head table in my dress blues, watching him find his footing at the microphone, tapping it twice, waiting for the room to look at him. "I only married her for the benefits," he said. And the room laughed. That's where we left off. That's where it really begins. The thing about a wedding reception is that everyone is drunk on champagne and relief, and 140 people will forgive almost anything if it's delivered with a smile. Derek smiled. He always smiled. He put his hand over his heart like a man performing sincerity and said, "I'm kidding, obviously. But seriously, TRICARE, guys. Do you know what that saves me a year?" And the room laughed harder, because now it was a joke about health insurance, and jokes about health insurance are safe. I sat through the rest of the toast with my spine straight, and my face doing what 9 years of military bearing had trained it to do. Ruiz found me at the edge of the dance floor an hour later, still in his ASU, cinnamon gum working overtime. "You good?" he asked. "I'm good," I said, which was a lie, and he knew it, because Ruiz always knew when I was lying to myself before I did. "I got a weird call this week," he said. "From a woman named Priya. Says she works with Derek. Says there's stuff you should know before you leave for the honeymoon." He handed me a folded piece of paper with a phone number on it. I told her I'd pass it along. "Your call, what you do with it." I put it in my clutch next to the phone that had already buzzed once that night. I told myself it could wait until Monday. It could not wait until Monday. We left for a 4-day honeymoon at a lake house Derek's family owned 2 hours from base. Modest, wood-paneled, the kind of place with a dock and a coffee maker older than either of us. The first morning, I woke up before him, the way I always did, and reached for my phone to check the account we just opened jointly for wedding gift money. There was a pending transaction I didn't recognize. $12,000, routed to an account labeled only with a set of initials, DH. His own initials, moving money out of an account we'd had for 6 days. I didn't say anything yet. I made coffee. I sat at the dock with the fog still sitting low on the water, and I called the number Ruiz had given me. The lake was flat and gray under the fog, a single loon calling somewhere out past the dock pilings, and I sat with my coffee going cold in my hands, working up the nerve to make a call I already suspected would change everything. Priya Nolan answered on the second ring, like she'd been expecting the call and dreading it at the same time. "I wasn't sure you'd call," she said. "I wasn't sure I would either," I said. "What do you need to tell me?" There was a long pause, the kind that tells you the next sentence is going to cost something. "Derek and I dated for 8 months," she said. "It ended 3 weeks before your wedding. He told me it was because his divorce wasn't finalized yet, and he didn't want to drag me into the mess of it." I sat very still on that dock. "His divorce," I repeated. "You didn't know he was married before," she said. It wasn't a question. I did not know he was married before. That's the first thing you should know about how the next 4 days went. The reveals didn't come one at a time, gently, with room to breathe between them. They came the way artillery comes. You hear the first one, and you're still flinching from it when the second one lands closer. I called the county clerk's office that Priya said Derek's first marriage had been filed in, using the professional, even voice I use for interrogatory work, the voice that gets civilians to hand over records without asking too many questions. What I found by that afternoon was this. Derek Holt had filed for divorce from a woman named Christine Holt 14 months earlier. The filing was still listed as pending, no finalization date, no decree, which meant that 4 days into our marriage, I might not legally be married at all. I didn't confront him yet. 9 years in military intelligence teaches you one thing above all else. You don't tip your hand until you know the full shape of what you're holding. I went back inside, made him breakfast like nothing had happened, and watched him check his phone 4 times before 10 in the morning, smiling at something he wouldn't show me. That evening, while he was in the shower, I opened the folder of wedding paperwork sitting on the kitchen counter. Insurance forms, benefit enrollment, the packet from finance that every military spouse fills out. I found a service member's group life insurance beneficiary change form. My signature was on it. I had never signed it. I stood in that wood-paneled kitchen holding a form with a forged version of my own name on it, listing Derek Holt as sole beneficiary of a $400,000 policy, dated 2 days before our wedding. Before I had even agreed, on paper, to marry him. My hands were steady, they always are. It's the rest of me that goes quiet. That night I called Captain Elena Ford, a JAG attorney I'd worked with years earlier on a case involving a soldier's fraudulent power of attorney. She had a habit of tapping her pen twice against the desk before she spoke, like she was giving herself a beat to choose the right words. "Don't confront him yet," she said, after I laid it out. "Not until you have copies of everything. The SGLI form, the bank transfer, anything in writing from Priya. If this is what it sounds like, you want documentation before you want a conversation. Evidence first, feelings later." "He forged my name," I said. "I heard you," she said, and there was something almost gentle under the professional flatness of her voice. "That's exactly why you don't say a word yet." I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to a man I'd promised my life to 4 days earlier, listening to him breathe. And I thought about the way he'd tapped that microphone twice before he said the line that made a room full of people laugh at me. I went back to work that Tuesday because the Army doesn't pause for a honeymoon gone sideways. And there is a strange mercy in routine when your personal life is collapsing. I ran my normal intelligence briefing at 0700, laying out a training area logistics summary to a room of officers who had no idea the woman at the podium had spent the previous night reading a forged version of her own signature under a lamp at a lake house. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't shake. The briefing ran 4 minutes long because I answered every follow-up question in full, the way I always did. Because the version of me that briefs a room doesn't get to fall apart just because the version of me that got married 4 days ago wants to. I walked my platoon through a training update afterward, checked equipment logs, signed off on a supply manifest with the same steady hand I'd used to hold that forged form the night before. There's a discipline to it that people outside the uniform don't always fully understand. The ability to compartmentalize grief and betrayal into a box small enough to carry through an 8-hour workday, and open it again only once the workday is done. I've used that discipline in worse places than a supply room. I used it there too. Ruiz caught me in the hallway afterward, gum working, eyes sharp. "You look like a woman who found something," he said. "I found several somethings," I said. "You gonna tell me, or am I gonna keep guessing?" I told him. All of it. The pending divorce, the forged SGLI form, the money moved out of our joint account. Ruiz went quiet in a way I'd only seen him go quiet once before, on a bad night during our deployment when a convoy update came back wrong. "There's more," he said finally. "The woman who called me, Priya, she told me something else. Something about his mother." That was the moment I understood this wasn't going to stop at one betrayal. This was layers, and I hadn't found the bottom yet. I called Priya back that evening. She sounded more tired this time, like the weight of telling the truth was heavier the second time around. "Linda knew," she said, meaning Derek's mother. The woman with the pearl necklace who'd hosted our engagement dinner and cried real tears watching her son walk me down the aisle at rehearsal. She knew about Christine still not being finalized. She told Derek it would work itself out before anyone noticed. She helped him move some of Christine's things out of storage so you wouldn't find them if you ever went looking. I thought about Linda wringing her hands at that engagement dinner, the way she'd squeezed mine and told me I was exactly the woman her son needed. I didn't know yet whether that had been a lie or a hope she'd talked herself into. I only knew she'd known. 4 days. That's all the honeymoon lasted before I understood the shape of the man I'd married, and I still hadn't confronted him with a single word. Captain Ford called me back on day 3 with instructions that were less about comfort and more about tactics, which was exactly what I needed. Get the county divorce filing in writing, certified if you can. Screenshot the bank transfer before it clears, and do not, under any circumstances, sign anything else he puts in front of you, including anything he calls a joint account update or an insurance correction. If he asks you to sign something in the next 24 hours, tell him you want your own lawyer to look at it first. He's going to know something's wrong. Let him wonder, she said. Wondering is not the same as knowing. I went back to the lake house that evening and found Derek at the kitchen table with 2 glasses of wine poured and a manila folder in front of him, smiling the smile that used to make me feel chosen and now made my stomach turn. "I want to talk about combining our finances properly," he said, sliding the folder toward me. "Get you added to some things, get me added to a few of yours. Simplify everything before we're back at Kessler and things get busy again." I looked at that folder and thought about the forged form already sitting inside a different one, in Captain Ford's office, waiting. "I'd like my own attorney to look at anything financial before I sign it," I said, keeping my voice as even as I kept it during briefings. Standard practice, you understand. Something flickered behind his eyes. Not guilt, I realized later, but recalculation. A man rearranging his plan in real time. "Sure," he said. "Of course." He poured himself more wine. I didn't touch mine. The next morning, day 4, Ruiz called before I'd even finished my coffee. His voice had none of its usual ease in it. "Cal," he said, "you need to get back to base today. There's a retirement ceremony for Sergeant Major Alvarez this afternoon. A bunch of the brass will be there, including your husband's old fraternity buddy, Captain Whitlock, who apparently loves talking. Whitlock's been telling people a story about you, about how you married up and Derek's carrying you financially. Says Derek's been telling that story around the office for months." I sat with that for a moment. The idea that this hadn't started at the wedding. That the joke at the microphone hadn't been an ad-lib. It had been a script he'd been rehearsing in rooms I wasn't in for longer than I wanted to think about. "There's one more thing," Ruiz said, and I could hear him choosing his words carefully. Christine, the first wife, she reached out to Priya. She's not just an ex he divorced quietly. She says Derek did the same beneficiary trick to her back when they were married. She's got documentation. She wants to talk to you. I stood in that kitchen, 4 days into a marriage built on a foundation I now understood to be built on someone else's exact same collapse. And I thought about my grandmother's advice from the last wedding I'd attended as a bridesmaid. Marry someone who tells the truth, even when the truth is inconvenient. I hadn't understood, at the time, how much weight that sentence could carry. "I'm coming back to base," I told Ruiz. "Today." "Good," he said, "because Whitlock's going to be at that ceremony, and so is your husband. He got himself invited as your +1. I think you should be there too." I packed my bag in 11 minutes. Derek asked where I was going, and I told him the truth. That duty called, that a senior NCO's retirement ceremony wasn't something I could skip, that he was welcome to come if he wanted. He wanted to come. Of course he wanted to come. A room full of officers was exactly the kind of room Derek liked being seen in. I drove us back to Fort Kessler in near silence, my mind running through the shape of everything I now knew. The pending divorce, the forged form, the moved money, his mother's complicity, the rehearsed joke, and now a first wife with the same story sitting in her hands. 5 separate betrayals, each one a little more calculated than the last, and I hadn't said a single confronting word to him yet. I was done waiting to say something. I just wanted to say it in a room where the truth would have somewhere solid to land. The retirement ceremony was held in the same event hall where I'd once stood for my own re-enlistment. Rows of folding chairs facing a small stage with a podium and a flag detail at attention along the back wall. A long table of sheet cake and coffee urns set up beneath a banner that read, "Thank you for your service, Sergeant Major Alvarez." Derek wore a blazer too nice for the room and worked it like a networking event, shaking hands with officers whose names he'd clearly memorized off my old unit rosters, laughing that half-second early laugh I used to find so charming and now recognized as a kind of performance he never turned off. I stood near the back with Captain Ford, watching him work the room like he had nothing to lose, and I thought about how strange it was that a man could stand inside the exact evidence of his own unraveling and not feel it yet. Captain Ford was there too. I'd asked her to come, told her only that I might need her, and she'd shown up in her service uniform without asking why, which told me everything about the kind of officer she was. Sergeant Major Alvarez gave his remarks. The room applauded. And then, in the loose, mingling minutes afterward, Captain Whitlock found Derek near the refreshment table, clapped him on the shoulder, and said, loud enough for the surrounding cluster of guests to hear, "There he is, the man who married into the world's best insurance plan." A few people laughed. Derek laughed loudest, playing to the room the way he always did. That's when Ruiz stepped forward. He wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. He walked up in his dress uniform, cinnamon gum still working slow in his jaw, and looked Derek dead in the eye. "Sir," he said, "do you know who she really is?" Derek blinked, caught off guard by the question's flatness, the total absence of a joke in it. "What?" "Your wife," Ruiz said. "Staff Sergeant Maya Calloway. Do you actually know who she is, or do you just know what you think you married?" The room had gone quiet in that particular way a room goes quiet when it senses something real is about to happen. "She's military intelligence," Ruiz continued evenly. "Bronze Star recipient. She pulled 2 soldiers out of a burning vehicle during our deployment and never told half the people in this room about it because she doesn't lead with it. She's been selected for a commissioning board next quarter, officer candidate school, if she wants it. She outranks half the men in your little joke about benefits, sir. And 4 days, your own wedding, you stood at a microphone and told a room full of people you married her for a TRICARE plan." Derek's face had gone the particular shade of pale that comes from a man realizing, in real time, that he's badly miscalculated an audience. "I don't know what this is," he started. But Captain Ford stepped forward before he could finish, a manila folder in her hand, the same kind of folder he'd once slid across a kitchen table toward me. Derek's face had gone the particular shade of pale that comes from a man realizing in real time that he's badly miscalculated an audience. "I don't know what this is," he started, but Captain Ford stepped forward before he could finish, a manila folder in her hand, the same kind of folder he'd once slid across a kitchen table toward me. "Mr. Holt," she said, tapping the folder twice against her palm before she opened it. "I have a certified copy of a divorce filing from Whitfield County showing your marriage to Christine Holt was never finalized as of the date you married Staff Sergeant Calloway. I also have a service member's group life insurance beneficiary change form bearing her signature dated 2 days before your wedding, a signature she did not provide." The color that had drained from Derek's face didn't come back.
"That's a mistake,"
he said.
"Someone else must have."
"There's a notary seal on it," Captain Ford said, calm as still water. "With the name and the license number. We already called her. She doesn't recall ever meeting Staff Sergeant Calloway." The room around us had gone completely silent now, the kind of silence that has weight to it. I watched Derek's eyes move from Captain Ford to Ruiz to me, searching for an angle he no longer had.
"Maya,"
he said, softer now, trying the version of his voice that used to work on me.
"Let's talk about this at home."
"We're not going home together," I said. It was the first thing I'd said to him directly since the toast 4 nights earlier, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. I'm not sure we were ever legally home together at all. That should have been the end of it, the confrontation, the evidence laid bare, the room bearing witness. But truth has a way of pulling one more thread once you start. Linda Holt was standing near the back of the hall, pearl necklace catching the overhead lights, hands wrung together the way I remembered from the engagement dinner. She stepped forward, not toward her son, but toward me. "I need to tell you something," she said, voice cracking. "Christine came to see me 2 weeks ago, before the wedding. She showed me proof the divorce wasn't final. I told her I'd handle it." She looked at Derek, and something in her face broke open. "I believed him when he said it was a clerical delay. I wanted to believe him. I'm his mother. But I should have told you the truth the moment I doubted him, and I didn't. And I am so sorry." It wasn't redemption yet, but it was the first honest thing I'd heard from anyone connected to Derek in 4 days, and it landed differently than everything else that had. Then Priya Nolan appeared at the edge of the hall. I hadn't known she was coming, hadn't asked her to, with a woman I didn't recognize beside her, dark-haired, tired-eyed, holding a folder of her own. "This is Christine," Priya said quietly. "She wanted to be here. She wanted you to know you're not the only one he did this to." Christine stepped forward and set her folder on the refreshment table between us, next to a half-eaten sheet cake meant for a retiring sergeant major's happy afternoon. "He forged my signature on a beneficiary change, too," she said. 3 years ago. I found out after we separated. I thought I was the only one foolish enough to fall for it." She looked at me, something like relief crossing her face. "I'm glad I wasn't." Derek stood in the middle of that circle, his mother, his ex-wife, his former mistress, his wife of 4 days, a JAG attorney, and a room full of witnesses in uniform, and for the first time since I'd met him, he had nothing to say. The consequences moved faster than I expected once the paperwork started talking instead of Derek. Captain Ford filed the certified divorce records with the county the following week, which meant our marriage was voided outright, never legally valid to begin with, since Derek's divorce from Christine hadn't been finalized. The forged SGLI form went to Army Criminal Investigation Division, since federal insurance fraud isn't something a base takes lightly when a service member's signature is involved. Christine's matching case, filed separately but built on the same pattern, meant Derek wasn't looking at one fraud charge. He was looking at a pattern of them, and prosecutors like patterns. He lost his job at the wealth consulting firm within a month. His employer, it turned out, did not appreciate discovering an active fraud investigation attached to their name in the local paper. The
The last I heard, he'd taken a plea agreement on the forgery charges that kept him out of a courtroom trial, but not out of a felony record, restitution payments to both me and Christine, and a 5-year probation period that meant, for once in his life, someone else was checking his paperwork instead of the other way around. I sat in the courthouse hallway the day he entered his plea, in uniform, because I wanted him to see exactly who he'd been standing across from the whole time. He didn't look at me on his way out. I didn't need him to. I'd stopped needing anything from Derek Holt the moment Captain Ford tapped that folder against her palm and the room went quiet.
Linda Holt didn't disappear the way I expected her to. She called me 3 weeks after the ceremony, her voice smaller than I remembered it, and asked if she could return something. My grandmother's pearl bracelet, which I'd lent her for the wedding and never gotten back in the chaos. She drove 2 hours to hand it to me in person, and she didn't ask for forgiveness. She just said, "I should have called Christine back sooner. I'm not asking you to forget that. I just wanted you to have this back the right way." I took the bracelet. I didn't tell her everything was fine because it wasn't, but I also didn't close the door on her the way I closed it on her son. Some people deserve the full weight of consequence. Some people deserve room to become someone better than the choice they made once. Priya reached out one more time, a few weeks later, to apologize for not telling me sooner about Derek's engagement to Christine, about the pattern she hadn't fully understood until it was already happening to her too. I didn't blame her. She'd been lied to with the same practiced ease I had, just 18 months earlier. She was the one who'd handed me the first thread that unraveled the whole thing, and I told her that mattered more than any delay. Christine and I stayed in touch. We didn't become close friends exactly, but we understood something about each other that most people wouldn't. The specific, quiet humiliation of realizing a man's affection had a form attached to it the whole time. We had coffee twice. She's engaged again now, to someone she says double-checks every document before he signs it, which made both of us laugh harder than the joke deserved. Ruiz got what he'd earned too, though he'd never have asked for it. I put him up for a leadership award at the next quarterly board, citing the ceremony incident as one small example of the kind of NCO he'd been for me and for our platoon for years. Steady, unglamorous, exactly where you needed him. He made Sergeant First Class permanent that spring. He still chews cinnamon gum through every briefing. He still says paperwork doesn't lie. 1 year later, I stood in a different hall on Fort Kessler, in a different uniform. Second lieutenant's bars pinned to my collar after finishing officer candidate school. The commissioning board Ruiz had mentioned to Derek that afternoon having gone exactly the way it was supposed to. My mother pinned one bar. Ruiz pinned the other, gum working the whole time, grinning like he'd known this was coming since long before I did. I think about that wedding sometimes, the microphone, the laugh that rippled through 140 people, the way Derek tapped the mic twice before he said the line he thought was harmless. He was right about one thing in the end, even if he never meant it the way it turned out to be true. He really didn't know who he'd married. None of them ever really did. If you've ever had someone try to make you smaller in a room full of people who were supposed to be celebrating you, hold your ground. The truth doesn't need you to raise your voice. It just needs time and the right paperwork. And people willing to ask the one question that matters. Do you know who she really is? If this story meant something to you, I'd love to hear which part hit hardest in the comments. And if you want more stories like this one, hit subscribe. There's always another truth waiting to catch up to the people who thought they'd outrun it.